Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Travel. My name is Gary Arndt, coming to you from slightly warming Minneapolis, Minnesota, on my lightning-fast gigabit Ethernet connection. With us again, as usual, is the man so nice they named him twice, Mr. Chris Christensen. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well. I am also coming on fast internet because I'm sitting in the TripAdvisor worldwide headquarters by myself, so I've got all that bandwidth.
What kind of connection do they have?
I didn't do a speed test before, but you can tell from the video that it's pretty good.
And not only that, you're in high definition.
I am in high def.
This would be just kind of very meta, but I would leave a TripAdvisor review about the TripAdvisor office.
I believe the TripAdvisor office is already on TripAdvisor, as well as the farm in the show The Office. One of the guys runs a farm, Schrute Farms.
Yeah.
That's the test site that all the TripAdvisor engineers use for testing new features. So the dirty little secret is that you can leave a review for Schrute Farms.
Excellent. Jen is not with us this week. I don't know what she's doing, but she's off doing Jen things. But our guest this week, now, it's in the Bible. I believe it's Donald Trump said it was 2 Corinthians or something like that. It says that the guest shall one day become the host. Now, I'm normally on their show as the guest, but today the tables have been turned. So I want to welcome, I think they were on the show quite a while ago, but I want to welcome them back, Elizabeth Harriman and Paul Lasley from On Travel for the American Forces Radio Network. Welcome back, guys.
Hey, Gary, we're happy to be here for sure. And you know, the other thing is, isn't that Corinthians 2 or something like that? Isn't that what he said?
It was the sequel to Corinthians. It did really well at the box office. That's all I remember.
The book was bad.
Yeah, you know, it's my favorite book.
Well, you know, we can't thank you enough for inviting us. It's an honor to be here, and not only that, to work with the two of you who are we've had you both on our show, so it's only fair that we get to watch you do all the timing and keep the conversation going.
And do the hard work, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're going to find this isn't quite the professional operation that you guys run.
But hey, it's fun.
Well, yes,
I think you guys are great.
And I
you
noticed
look fabulous.
And you provided catering.
Yes, we're having the champagne and chocolates.
We hope you enjoy the green room. But maybe we should move on to news stories at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go on to our first news story. Ever since we've been doing this show for, this will be the 7th year coming up this summer, and I think every one of these years, Chris has predicted that the travel ban to Cuba was going to be lifted. And I think 7 is the lucky charm because this looks to be the year it finally happens. So the United States has announced that they're finally going to start allowing direct commercial flights to Cuba from the United States. And I think they announced there are going to be 20 daily round-trip flights between the U.S. and Havana and 10 other round-trip flights to other Cuban cities. And the airlines, I think that it was Delta and American and JetBlue and maybe Southwest were looking at doing it. This should be starting sometime, I think, in September. So would you guys consider getting on one of the first flights to go to Cuba?
Absolutely. Well, Paul's actually been to Cuba, but that was on a charter flight.
Yeah.
What was it like?
Well, you know, I would go now because this is going to change faster than lightning. I mean, this is going to be another revolution in the making because everybody we talk to, and I think the buzz on the internet and everything is about going to Cuba. And I think the minute it's going to be easy to go for Americans, it's going to just really take off.
So we almost did the amateur traveler trip that's coming up, the one that's going to Cambodia in less than a month now, to Cuba this year. But the problem is that it's not the flights, it's still the rules that are in place because we still have the Treasury embargo is still in place and still needs an act of Congress to remove that. And so what that means is you can go, but you still have to go under the restrictions of being one of the people-to-people programs or something like that. And you can see if you go to, like, we were looking at Intrepid Travel because I work with them, and if you're an American, you can go on pretty much the same kind of trip you could as a Canadian, just 3 times as much money. And so, I mean, that's the reason why we decided not to go, is until they lift some of those restrictions, it's not a cheap place to go, it's an expensive place to go for Americans.
It is an expensive place to go, but I still would go. I mean, I would set aside the money to go. There are, I think, 12 categories that are still in place. Yeah, either like a people-to-people program or educational, or if you're a journalist, there are all sorts of categories. But yeah, it's the embargo is still there, and as I understand it, it's really not illegal to travel to Cuba. It's illegal to spend money there. But until they actually lift that, the embargo is still in place. But I think this is one of the things, and no matter who gets elected in November, I think the toothpaste is out of the tube. I think so many people are interested in going to Cuba, so many cruise lines are interested in adding Cuba as a port, that I think eventually the embargo will be lifted. The other thing is
I don't think anything will happen before the presidential election, because Florida is still a swing state. And unless something changes that,
yeah,
I think you're right. Right.
Well, and the other thing is that you mentioned the price. That's going to keep a lot of people out of it. When the price gets down, there's no question. I've seen. I think in Canada it's $7.99 a week, including air.
Yeah, that's basically. I saw something that was like $1,000 for a guided trip for 10 days, and went, well, we're going to Cuba, and then I think my wife said, yeah, not for you.
Yeah. Well,
for you, it's $3,000. It's like, oh, okay.
When we went last year, I went just for 4 nights. It was $2,000.
Yeah.
And that's a chunk of change.
But what an experience! And I think the people-to-people programs are wonderful. You get to learn about the art, the culture, the history. I mean, this is not a vacation where you just go and lie on the beach.
Well, it is if you're Canadian.
Well, I guess if you're Canadian, you can do that, yeah. Those Canadians, they have all the fun.
The other thing is, I would suggest going as soon as you can, because it is going to change. And right now there's an ingenuousness about the Cuban people. They're still struggling with this embargo and the effects of it. And I talked to one man in Havana, and we were talking about what the effects would be, and he said, we don't need all this stuff they're talking about in the embargo. We just need paint. And, when you think about that, but you look around you, and these buildings could use a lot of paint. There's no question about it. They could use other things. The surprising thing was that there were very luxurious boutique hotels being built in Havana. Mm-hmm. So they're ready. There's no question about it.
Well, one of the reasons I am not predicting that they're going to lift the embargo this year is I think that's the sure bet to get them to lift the embargo is if I don't predict it for a change.
Oh, there you go. Well, thank you, Chris.
Good for you. But you're right.
I have been wrong so many times, as Barry points out.
Well, and it's all about the politics of it in an election year. We're not going to see, I think, the change. I think you're right about that. But you never know. Now that you're not predicting anything, the world is open.
Anything could happen.
If you actually look at the categories of approved travel to Cuba, they're pretty broad. Yeah. And there's one actually, which is the exportation, importation, or transmission of information or informational materials. Now, there is one sort of informational material which is called a book. In theory, if you were to give books to Cubans, I think it would qualify, technically, under the approved travel to Cuba.
Yeah, but I think for a lot of those things, you have to actually go to the government and get approved for your trip. And that's one of the reasons that the costs are there, is basically the extra U.S. red tape you have to jump through.
With the latest thing in place, you do not need prior approval for these categories. You just have to say a good faith, this is why I'm going. So it used to be you had to get prior approval. Now you don't have to get prior approval. You just need to assert that or verify that, yes, I am going under one of these things.
And the tour operator will handle all the red tape. And then you took notes, didn't you, Paul, when you were there?
I did take notes, and I actually recorded some radio shows when I was there. And frankly, nobody seems to care. You know, I mean, now I was told that the only people who care is the United States. The Cubans are just happy to have you, which is probably true.
And also, one of the categories is support for the Cuban people.
Hey.
Now, I think spending money and helping their economy is support for the Cuban people. So,
you're right.
Who's to say it's not?
You know, I bought 2 CDs when I was there from these musical groups. The music is fantastic in Cuba. There's no question about it. And I bought 2 CDs. They were obviously CDs that somebody had burned in their home computer, but they were great. It was great music, nevertheless. So I supported the Cuban economy.
Certainly did. And you
Well,
said
we should also note number 7 is public performances, clinic workshops, expositions, or athletic competitions. So if you were to go to a baseball game or watch some people play music, in theory, you would also be meeting the terms. So.
Well, that's why about these tours that go, yeah, you can't just go lie on the beach. You go and you take dancing lessons. I talked to a woman who went on a tour. Tauk offers tours, and also
Is it dancing lesson? Really?
Yeah, they took a dancing lesson in some kind of Latin American dance, but did you interact with the Cuban people? They loved it. And then another thing about Cuba is the countryside is unspoiled. And you spoke to somebody who explained why one of the most pristine national parks in North America is in Cuba.
North America. Well, yes, or in the Northern Hemisphere.
Northern
perhaps.
Hemisphere.
Yes,
it's not North America. Sorry.
Actually, the story that I heard, and I don't know whether it's true or not, probably is, that Fidel appointed a farmer that he met back in the day when he and the group were living out in the mountains as the minister of interior or exterior, I guess it was, or something. And this man loves this land, and it's one of the largest pristine natural areas in the Caribbean. And so I think there will be a lot of reasons to go to Cuba beyond, I don't know, music.
Beyond just the novelty.
Yeah.
Beyond the mojitos?
Mojitos, that's right. That's a good.
Yes.
That's a good reason.
And you know, there's a Cuban American Chamber of Commerce in Key West, Florida, and I interviewed the guy who was like the head of it at the time. I assume he still is, and in Key West, and we had mojitos. Now, I can't really vouch for great mojitos. I drink wine, not alcohol really, or heavy alcohol, and so they were great though. I have to say that. I noticed he was smoking this incredibly gorgeous cigar. Now, I want to be a man around town, a bon vivant, a raconteur, and I always think it would be awfully nice if I had a cigar in my hand.
Along with the mojito.
I hate cigars. I've tried. I've done everything I can. I can't smoke a cigar, nor do I even want to be near someone smoking a cigar. But this cigar was gorgeous. And I said, "Where do you get that?" And he says, "We have ways." And this was before the cigar ban was lifted.
Yeah, because you can bring like up to $300 or something of cigars and rum, I believe, from Cuba, something like that.
And if I ever drank rum, I would drink Cuban rum.
I'd rather have the rum than the cigars.
Me too. Me too.
There was because I was in Key West last summer, they announced a ferry service. I don't know if it started yet. That was supposed to go from Key West to Cuba. And it was like a 2 or 3 hour ferry or something that would be going like 1 or 2 times a day.
The walls are coming down.
That's another way to do it. Let's move on to our next news story, and this is kind of interesting. A Tennessee Democrat, Steve Cohen, wants the FAA to start regulating seat size in airplanes, in particular because for safety reasons. He claims that the FAA has never actually tested a rapid evacuation of a plane with some of these smaller seat sizes, in particular with legroom. So, do you think that the FAA should be regulating this? And if so, how and what should the regulations be?
Well, I don't know what the regulations should be, but I definitely think the FAA should get involved and do research and find out what the minimum should be, not only for the evacuation, but also for health. You know, Americans are getting bigger while the airline seats are getting smaller, so it's not so good for your health to be all cramped up like that either. So I'm sure there's research that they could do. And yes, I think the FAA should get involved, because there was some airline that was even going to, it was going to be a pilot project to test putting a bench in instead of airline seats. And they're getting crazy. Left to their own devices.
Usually those are announced by things like Spirit Air, our friends at Spirit Air, who will announce something like stand-ups every year, or Ryanair, who will announce, pay toilets, and then they're just kind of really trying to get PR. I don't know that anybody is serious about that. But if you do look at the seat pitch and some of those real budget airlines, the way they get the prices down is they put in more seats. And, American tried, I don't know if you remember this, American tried 10 years ago or so. They said, we're going to be the airline that's going to have more legroom, more legroom, more legroom. And they raised their prices because they had fewer seats, and they lost business.
Yeah.
We didn't care, is really what happened. People don't really think about seat. I'm here at TripAdvisor working on Seat Guru, so I know something about a little bit about seat pitch and those sort of things. But a lot of times people just don't care. They'll buy airline tickets just based on the ticket price, not even taking into account baggage fees, which we've seen, and not taking into account seat pitch or anything like that.
I think you're right.
I think that Gary has a great point, though. I mean, this congressman who introduced this, I don't see people doing a rapid evacuation out of some of these seats. In order to get in and out of a coach seat on most airlines today, you really have to almost go in sideways. I mean, it really is that tight. And the other thing, of course, that just mystifies me, have you guys noticed this in the videos of these evacuations of the...
Everybody taking their luggage.
Everybody's taking their luggage. And
that's the real problem with the evacuations, isn't the seat.
You've got seconds to get out of that plane, and you're looking for your luggage? I mean, wow.
Yeah. You're basically risking your life or somebody else's with smoke inhalation, because it doesn't take that long.
I've always wondered, I understand where the legroom is going, that they can just squish the seats closer together and add another row.
Right.
But in terms of seat width, where's that going? Because there's usually, maybe 3 in one aisle, 3 in the other.
Gary, I think that's mostly going to donuts. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have problems with seat width.
No, but there's always been stuff like it's 1 or 2 inches narrower than it used to be like 20 years ago or something.
Whereas people's fannies are getting wider because of the donuts they're eating.
No, it's not because of donuts. It's genetics.
I don't know. I mean, basically, it would have to, if there's any extra space that's going, it would have to be in the aisles, but that sure doesn't seem like the aisles have gotten any bigger. So.
No, but Chris, you mentioned Seat Guru, and they will tell you can get on a plane, same model plane, and there will be like 9 across on some of these wide bodies, and some of them will have 10 across, and it's the same plane. It's frightening to think about that.
Well, the other thing, and I think one of the things that their senators, or the congressman is concerned about too, and I don't know that it's a bad thing, but one of the things that we're seeing is to put more seats in the plane. They're not necessarily now playing with the seat pitch as much, because there's just kind of only so much you can do. There's already so many battles about people reclining, but they're making the thinner seats.
Yes.
Which are supposed to be safe, but that's going to be the other thing I think that he would prefer to see them regulate. Just basically weigh in on the issue, and they may already weigh in on the safety of those seats. That I'm not sure about.
There's a lot of controversy about whether the FAA regulations and reenactments for these evacuations are accurate or not. My guess is if it's a real evacuation, everybody's going to get out, but because there will be this impetus to do so. But I still think it's an issue because, as Gary was mentioning, that seat pitch, not so much pitch, but the actual width between the seat and the seat in front of it. Pitch is actually, what is it, between your nose and the seat back or something like that?
No, the seat pitch is between the front of your seat and the front of the next seat.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
That's your seat.
So that's seat pitch. Well, anyway, I think it needs to be regulated. I really do.
Yeah.
Because I've never. You're right. You know, American did all of that. The prices went up. They were going to give you. Then what did they do? They got rid of the seat, the extra space, but kept the price up.
Yeah.
They did that more quietly, though.
But you go.
Actually, their prices did come down somewhat because they had to. They were basically, there were times that I could book flights here to Boston on like United or American, and American was significantly more, but it was half full. So they were really getting creamed when they tried that experiment.
Yeah.
You know, I will say in America, not really in their defense, because it's $2,400 for the seat in business class when they have these first business class and coach flights, so 3-class flights on American going to New York and maybe to Boston too, I'm not sure. Elizabeth and I managed to get upgraded to business class from Los Angeles to New York. Coming back it was coach, of course, but anyway, on this one way we actually got upgraded. It was as close to heaven as possible. You had a lie-flat seat in there that you could sleep in. It was just amazing, but it's also $2,500, so a lot of money.
That, and if you're flying Los Angeles to New York, you probably shouldn't be sleeping because it's a 21-hour day and it's going to throw you off completely.
I'm going to let jet lag. You can deal with jet lag.
Sleep the other way, but don't sleep that way because that's really going to screw you up.
Yeah, right.
And Gary can tell us something about being screwed up by jet lag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been up since 2 in the morning, so since I got back from India.
Oh, right.
Although you can be oddly productive at that time of day. That's what I've discovered.
That's because you have nothing else to do.
Exactly, and no one's up, so nobody's bothering you. You're not getting emails or anything like that.
Well, Paul, you were saying that if people need to get off a plane, they probably will because there's impetus. But on the other hand, we had one of the stories, which we're not probably going to get into detail, about the Chinese fire drill, literally at the airport, where they had a fire on an airplane, and the fire crew quickly went out there and extinguished the wrong plane. So.
Well, they all look alike. You know, all of the planes look alike. No, listen here. You know, if a guest
and on that note,
may be allowed to make a prediction, my prediction is there will be a new fee on some of the discount airlines, and that is you will get, if you want a seatbelt, it will cost you extra.
Yeah.
If they could. In the case of an emergency, oxygen will fall from the ceiling. Be sure to have exact change.
Yes, or no, we don't take change anymore. Have your credit card handy.
Credit card ready.
That's right.
Let's go to one other news story here. This is from the Telegraph, and a passenger in California at the San Jose International Airport managed to get a video of some airline employees playing a game of Toss the Bag. I'm sure you grew up, you enjoyed a nice game of Toss the Bag when you were a kid.
In San Jose, that's one of our favorite activities.
But the amazing thing is like this, the video looks almost like it's staged, because they literally grab a bag and then they walk across this area and they throw it. And they don't even really make a good effort at throwing it, and they pick it up and they just do it again and do it again. And it looked so contrived that I was just kind of stunned, because it really wasn't like they would not be winning gold medals at Toss the Bag.
They also didn't look like they were having a lot of fun. If this was supposed to be, a fun game.
Well,
they say the airline spokesperson said no passenger bags were used for this activity. This game should not have been played at the airport. Everyone knows this is a home game.
Yeah. Don't you frequently take a suitcase out, toss it around just for the fun of it? I want.
Why would they? I don't know. I just don't. I do not understand.
I think Gary may be more observant than many who've commented on this, and that is, it doesn't look like it maybe is the real thing. But remember when that video came out of, what is it? And the
United
song,
Breaks Guitars.
Yeah,
yes.
That was the real thing.
Yeah.
3 videos in a row.
Was that right? Ooh.
Yeah.
All I know is that in Brazil later this year, I hope the Americans proudly take home gold and Toss the Bag.
It'll be a new Olympic
training.
gold, yes.
I believe we can do it.
Yeah.
Don't let the Russians take it this time.
Well, they're probably in training for it.
Definitely.
Well, let's move on to the news. We have Paul and Elizabeth here, and why don't you explain a little bit about what you guys do, both with the radio show and Elizabeth, maybe what you do with Westways Magazine.
Okay.
For the people that don't know what you guys are about, or maybe haven't listened to the show.
All right, Paul, you first.
Well, for 28 years, we have been producing 10 radio shows a week for American Forces Radio Network. And it's a great privilege to do it. We get incredible feedback, and we really feel like we're doing something for men and women in uniform. But actually, our mission is to encourage travel among Americans posted overseas. So our show is actually heard in embassies and consulates and research stations and all kinds of things like that. And so the guys in the troops in the field, we have been told, listen mostly to hip-hop and rap. Probably not us. But I have a really interesting story. Very quickly. We have a nephew who's in Special Ops. He's in a very special part of Special Ops. And on one of his trips into, as he describes it, a place he was not supposed to be. They are calibrating their computer dishes that they use to bring down data and stuff like this. And they're very small, and they have to be calibrated. And they're sending them a feed. And he's listening to this feed. And about halfway through the feed, he realizes that somebody is saying, "Hi, I'm Paul Lasley."
And I'm Elizabeth Harriman on travel.
And so
it was our show.
They
It was
were
our
actually,
1-minute feature.
through no planning of any kind, they happened to be downloading our show on his satellite.
As a test.
So
we're very, and then you can listen to the podcasts of those shows on our website on travel.com. And then putting on my other hat, I'm the travel editor of Westways Magazine, which is the AAA magazine for Southern California. And the Auto Club of Southern California also publishes 6 other AAA magazines from Hawaii to northern New England. And the thing you need to understand about AAA is it's a national organization, but then each club or group of clubs is independent. So AAA is the federation, the umbrella. And depending on where you live, you may get a AAA magazine, but it may not be one of the ones that we publish. And so, but as travel editor, it's really fun because I assign stories. I write some stories, but I work with some wonderful writers, and our art director works with wonderful photographers, and we like to tell great stories about travel, trying to encourage people to travel, to share the wonder of travel. And the Westways actually has been around for more than 100 years, and so we have a great tradition and a great relationship with our members. So that's what I do.
You know, I just briefly want to add that, and Gary alluded to this, you guys are the hosts and we're the guests here. That's a privilege because we've had you both on the air, and you do an incredible job here on Amateur Traveler and the Weekend Travel and all of your various things. And it is such a luxury not to be sitting here watching the clock tick down the seconds. That you have that luxury. You guys are very fortunate. You bring great information to podcasting around the world.
Well, now, in my understanding as a podcaster is that Armed Forces Radio, that's where the real money is.
Yeah. You know, we're almost ready to buy the villa in the south of France. But, no, the actuality is it's quite a bit less than that. But it's a tremendous opportunity, and we value that a lot. And
it's an honor to serve our heroes, men and women in service.
You know, the other thing is that we get something that we never got on commercial radio or even on NPR, emails that say, "We listen to you every day because you remind us of home." And that is a very, very special thing. So.
And Paul, one of the things you didn't mention is that you are also the president of the Society of American Travel Writers.
Yes, that and
President Day.
Yeah, that and $10 will get you a Big Mac. It's, or maybe, I don't know. I haven't had a Big Mac for a long time. The price may have gone up, but yeah, we are a group, and Gary is a member, and we have to get Chris in there probably at some point.
Yes, Chris.
We are about 1,300 members in America, and they're very carefully vetted. You have to prove your chops, as it were, as a travel journalist. And so we're working on that, and our convention this year will be in China in November.
And where in China?
Wenzhou, which is, or Wenzhou, I've been told. I'm not sure the pronunciation, but they seem to still like us. And we're about 4 hours by high-speed rail south of Shanghai. And it's considered one of the most prosperous areas in China, and also we're happy because they invited us, but it's also known as a center for Chinese leaving China to seek their fortune overseas and then returning. So the culture is very, very different, and it's a beautiful part of China. I've been there.
I have never been to mainland China.
Well, you've been most everywhere else.
Isn't this the year, Gary, you start filling in the big places on the map?
That's the goal, yeah. So I got to India finally, and hopefully China, Brazil, and Russia will be next.
We've never been to India, and I so envy you for that. It must be the cultural aspects of India must be just remarkable. And I remember we talked on the air about you photographing the Taj Mahal. You were first in line.
Yeah, in fact, I just got done editing those photos yesterday, and I'm probably going to sit down and actually write a post about how to photograph the Taj Mahal. But yeah, my only advice is to show up about an hour early.
Good.
So the gates will open at around 7 a.m. and I was there at like I think 5:50 a.m. and I was probably there 15 minutes before the second people in line. But because you're first, and if you're even there like a half hour, the line already tends to get quite long, and it gets very long because it's buses of people. So even if you're there early, you may have to still wait a half hour to get in because the line gets that long that quick.
Wow.
So you're not necessarily, you might actually be saving time showing up early, as paradoxical as that sounds.
Oh, it's a great tip, Gary. Thanks.
Well, and Chris, you're taking listeners off to some
exotic
other
location?
part of the world.
Angkor Wat, Cambodia.
Whoa! Have you been there?
At the end of this month.
See, you guys are going into host mode again.
Oh.
You're now asking us questions.
It's a habit we can't
It's
break.
a occupational hazard.
Okay.
I do it at cocktail parties. I don't know if you guys have stumbled into that too. You start talking to people and saying, "And where was your last vacation?"
Yes, actually.
What were the highlights? What surprised you with that?
I'm going
to summarize that trip in 3 words. What 3 words would you use?
I'm going to get centered here as a guest. Yes.
We'll behave.
Yes, we'll be.
Well, the people who listen to this show are probably astonished by the fact that you're able to do 10 shows a week, because we can barely come out with one a month at this point.
They were astonished that they're listening to one at all right now.
We're pretty astonished as ourselves.
Yeah, many times.
To be fair, we tried this show. This is the second time we tried this show, and the technology was just apparently beyond us last time. So we tried to do 1 or 2 shows that just didn't work out. So our apologies for not doing things more regularly, but it is not for lack of trying.
Well, you're very kind in that, but I must point out to all your listeners, you were all right. It was us. And you know why? Our broadband went out. We had no broadband for 3 days. And it finally just came back on, and there were no apologies issued whatsoever.
Well, and then Gary, being in India, just didn't have the bandwidth to do it while we were there, and Jen and I just couldn't coordinate our 2 schedules, unfortunately. So
yeah,
the trouble with having 3 hosts.
That's right. You guys do an amazing job, and I mean, we're in awe of that. And we listen to your podcasts, and we're proud to be associated with you, even as sometime guests with semi-functional bandwidth.
We are indeed, and actually, Jen was. I don't know where she is now, but I know where she was yesterday because she was on a panel that I moderated for the Travel and Tourism Marketing Association here in Southern California, and she was great. Paul was also on the panel, and he was great too.
Well, and considering you're sitting there in those beautiful palatial offices, I should tell you that Steve Coffer has been a guest on Traveling with Us 3 times, I believe. So we feel very privileged, believe me.
But even more privileged to have you guys on.
Yeah.
There we go again.
We're back to guests.
Back to you guys.
Well, let me. You said earlier you've been doing this now for what, 28 years?
Yes.
What's the biggest? I mean, that's in that 28 years, a lot has happened, both in the world of travel and in the world of media. And what's the biggest change that you've noticed?
Radio too.
Yeah, what's the biggest change you've noticed in that time period from when you started to today? Obviously, the internet. That's a pretty big thing. I mean, we're doing this. This would have been impossible 28 years ago.
It was darn near impossible today.
but what's changed the most since you've started?
Okay. Before you do that, Paul,
there we are. Okay, that's what's changed the most.
Because when we started.
Okay, most people will be listening.
Most people are listening, Paul. So we have to use words. Use your words.
Okay. Yes, it doesn't hurt.
All right. Radio.
This is video, isn't it?
Radio.
No, it's video.
Anyway, when we started out on KABC radio in Los Angeles, and we went into a studio with an engineer and a screener and several people, to help. At one point we had an intern that was helping us. Like we had staff. I mean, it wasn't our staff, but KABC had staff that we took advantage of. And then when we were on KPCC, very similarly, we had an engineer, we had a screener. Now today, and then if we would go on location, we'd have, 30 pounds of equipment and 3 people. Today, Paul travels with, it's something that
this is a microphone.
Microphone.
This is a microphone. Here we are, and it is a recording microphone. It records 3.5 hours of CD quality sound. Actually, it'll record almost 8 hours if I push the batteries, and it allows me to just think about recording. And it's so sophisticated.
No cords, no anything, no computers, no boxes.
Just use a USB port at the end, put it into the computer. And then we travel with a MacBook Air, 13-inch, the larger of the 2 MacBook Airs, and I edit in Logic and put everything up. And we have an FTP file folder that we use for American Forces, and that's how we do it now. Now, I have to tell you, it was much easier back when there was a guy with a tape recorder who had an on button and could write our levels. And then someone else said, we're coming up on 5, 4, 3, that kind of thing. But today it gives you so much more flexibility, and we can interview people we wouldn't have dreamed of doing years ago.
And in terms of what travel has changed, more people are traveling today. Travel has become more accessible. Travel used to be reserved more for people who were wealthier, older, had more time, and today everybody's traveling. Travel has become more accessible to everyone, and not just Americans, but now people in developing countries are traveling. I think travel is a great blessing, and I'm grateful to see that more people are able to take advantage of it now, because I think travel is an education, and I think it's a force for peace in the world and a force for good in the world. So the fact that it's more accessible, more families are traveling, more accessible to everyone, I think is a positive thing.
The thing that I noticed during the family trip that we did to like Bosnia, Croatia, and Austria last year with my 2 kids and my son-in-law and my wife and I is also how the technology has changed our travel experience. We're driving on the roads in Croatia and we're navigating with GPS, with downloaded maps, and we know where we are, and we're sitting in a restaurant in Vienna waving our iPhones or our Android phones over the menu, translating them instantaneously from German to English, and I'm thinking, we live in the future.
Yes.
The future is here, it's just not equally distributed.
We do, and Gary with his photography, and he's one of the world's great travel photographers, I mean, that's so evident in what he's doing as well. I mean, think about the back in the days of slides and you know, having to send them in for processing and things like that. So,
although to be fair, the processing was faster than waiting for Gary to edit his photos. So.
oh, well, I didn't want to mention that since we are guests.
You know, I started traveling in March of 2007, and that was the brief window between when Steve Jobs announced the iPhone and when it was available in stores. And so when I started, I had no iPhone, no smartphone at all. And I remember buying an iPod Touch, which is basically an iPhone minus the phone, in Tokyo in 2007. And just thinking that this was the greatest thing ever, because it removed and it didn't even have a camera in it at the time.
Right.
It didn't have a phone, but it got rid of so many devices. Mm-hmm. And over time, it's just gotten better and better. And I was just in India a couple weeks ago. I got a SIM card for under $15 for 5 gigs of data, which would cost, I don't know, $100 here in the United States. And I was able to use that to tether my laptop to get access. I was able to, you know, upload photos and be checking things all the time. And it's become incredible. If you have, you know, T-Mobile, in most countries you can actually roam with your regular account. I remember I was in France last year. I had a flat tire in my car. Everything was taken care of, and after it was done, I remember how difficult this would have been. Having a flat tire, contacting the car rental company, getting someone to come help us, it would have been just a nightmare. But it was actually relatively easy because all I had to do was place a phone call and it got taken care of. And I could give them the exact coordinates of where I was. And I think that's really been the biggest change. And it's getting easier and easier, not because the devices are changing, but because access and data is becoming easier and easier everywhere you go. Yeah. And I think that's been the biggest change.
When we were in China, I think the last time I was there, I needed to get on a call for business. I still was working a full-time job at that point, and I found free open Wi-Fi by one of the government buildings, and I'm sitting there on Skype on a conference call with the U.S., hanging outside a building in wherever the heck I was in China. But that's
unusual in China. The Wi-Fi in China was not all that fast or available.
Yes, less so than in other places.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
But of course, evidently in Gary's town, 1 gigabyte broadband. My heaven.
Well, you know, that's I've had some really interesting stories because I've been playing around with cord cutting, and I have a whole bunch of devices for my TV, and it's all taking advantage of this gigabit internet connection. And just today I installed a service that lets me get live streams of CNN, the History Channel. I just got a device I installed yesterday which lets me hook up my HD antenna so I can watch live stream through my Apple TV, or I can watch it on my desktop. It's really amazing the stuff that's happening with television as well. Absolutely. And I think we're very close, you know, to literally, well, actually, you could do it right now. Anybody could start their own channel.
Yes.
They could just create an app for Apple TV. And so it's not just creating video anymore, but the concept of creating a network is now within the realm of, you know, what, you know, a person could do.
Amazing.
I think that's remarkable.
Yep.
All right, then. You guys want to talk about anything else before we move on to our picks of the week?
No, that's well, we're just the guests.
No, but if you got anything you want to plug or talk about, I mean, this is the part of the show where you can do it. It's pretty flexible.
Well, speaking of, you know, we were talking about the congressman, and let's mention his name again. The congressman from Tennessee that says the FAA should regulate seats. It's, what was his name again? Tennessee Democrat Steve Cohen. Well, I'd like to give a shout out to Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri, also another Democrat. But we're not that we're taking sides here, but she has proposed a bill that would eliminate hidden resort fees. It would make the hotels reveal all those resort fees. That is one of our pet peeves, is those resort fees, and they're not, that you don't know about ahead of time. I remember, never forget, the first time we discovered one was at a Westin hotel out in the Palm Springs area, and we checked out and we said, "What is this resort fee?"
It was like $15 a day.
And they said, "Oh, that's for the free coffee in your room." And so I mean, if a hotel wants to do that, okay. But the problem is they often don't reveal them. And so anyway, Claire McCaskill has proposed a bill, and so that would require hotels and hotel chains to reveal all of that on their websites and everything. And I hope it goes through. The FTC has
I think it's likely to, because there are bills like that passed 4 years ago now for airline fees.
Yes.
Yeah. Basically, that when you have that great big number there, that has to be the inclusive number.
Yes, exactly.
Less asterisks was really what they're.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And actually, it'll be better for travel agents, because right now, they add those fees on afterwards. But if it's included in the fee, then they'll get a little more commission, and then the guest wins because they know ahead of time what their hotel stay is really going to cost.
We have Roger Dow on, who's the CEO of U.S. Travel, periodically, and he just comes on and we chat about things that he'd like to talk about. And the amazing thing is he keeps stressing the fact that travel is the non-outsourceable business that helps the United States. The money coming in from overseas travelers here is staggering, especially from China. But more than that is the political money that is flowing into these states, and how that impacts the tourist industry. So whether you're Democrat or Republican, you are supporting the travel industry with big bucks. Can you imagine the amount of money that flowed into the state of Iowa during those caucuses from, film crews, drivers, all this kind of stuff? It's a huge amount of money that influences the tourist industry in the United States. So he was suggesting that perhaps we should add a couple of years to the election process.
God save us all.
I don't think we could stand that, actually.
Well, I don't think people realize how big travel and tourism is. I think it's like a $10 trillion business worldwide. And the only difference between it and, say, like oil is that you don't have one or a few mammoth corporations. You have a lot of very small businesses. They could be restaurants, individual hotels or things like that. So they're maybe not as well organized, and maybe they don't have as much influence. And it's kind of like the forgotten industry. And I think a lot of politicians, they make decisions not thinking what it's going to do to tourism in the United States and the economic impact of that.
Yeah, I think
it seems like that has gotten better in the last few years, and maybe it's just because I'm an optimist, but it certainly had been overlooked. There's no question, but it feels like it may be turning. But I'm the guy who thought they were going to open up Cuba 6 years ago. So yeah.
No, I think you're right about that, Chris. And I think it's something like 1 in 9 Americans earns their living has some relation to the tourism industry. So it does have a great economic impact.
All right, well, now let's move on to our picks of the week. And Chris, you got anything for us?
Yeah, we were talking about apps, and that just reminded me, I don't know that I've ever mentioned on the show, I'm actually an advisor for a company that's got an interesting app. It's a great iPad app called Cruisable, which is trying to revolutionize kind of the interface for picking cruises and things like that. Interesting app. They're trying to get into the cruise booking and cruise, choosing a cruise and all those sorts of things. It's a lovely app, at least. So you ought to check it out. Cruisable.com.
How do you spell that?
Cruiseable. I don't remember the E's in between there or not.
Google will know.
It'll be in the show notes.
Uh-huh.
So So my pick this week. So I went to India, and this was the first time was able to use my new Sony AR7 II, which is
Ah.
a small camera, amazing picture quality. Very happy with the quality of the images I took. However, there's one downside compared to my previous camera, which was a Nikon SLR, and that is the battery life. I could go several weeks with one charge of a battery in my SLR, but I would go through 2 batteries a day with the
Oh
Sony
my.
because you're using an active video display every time you look through the viewfinder or looking at the back on the LCD, and that really eats up a lot of energy. So I would charge my batteries, but the problem is the charger that comes with the camera charges a single battery. But you got to have, you might go down, say, a battery and a half every day. And I found myself actually in Agra one day, and I remember, it was like noon, and I was like, oh crap, I've got 4% charge on my battery, and the other one's dead. And so we kind of had to call an audible, and instead of visiting a site and going to lunch, we went to lunch early so I could charge my battery, and then we went to the site. But when I got back, I solved that problem. So I got this little handy thing, and for those listening, it's a dual battery charger that I got on Amazon, and it fits the new Sony batteries, and it's from a company called Capanex, K-A-P-A-X-E-N, Capanzen. Anyways, you can find it on Amazon, but it's basically a dual battery charger. It has an AC adapter, it has a DC adapter so you can plug it in from a car, and it also has a USB adapter so you can actually run it from a USB. But because it does 2 batteries at once, that means I can put both batteries in when I go to bed. I wake up in the morning, and I got 2 fully charged batteries, which, based on my experiences in India, are probably enough for a day of shooting. I may end up buying a 3rd battery just so I have a oh no just in case with me, but this I think should solve most of my problems. And over the next couple episodes I'll probably talk about some other nifty little accessories I got for the camera, but as for this week, that's going to be my choice, a dual battery charger. And if you have any, not just the Sony, but any sort of mirrorless camera, you probably are going to definitely want to pay more attention to your battery and your battery charging than you otherwise did with an SLR.
Great.
All right then. Paul, Elizabeth, you guys have any sort of pick or recommendation this week?
Well, I have my pick is actually a travel tip, and that is simply to be sure to renew your passport early. A lot of people, there are a lot of passports becoming due in the next year or so because it's the 10th anniversary of the Western Hemisphere Initiative, where you had to have passports even to go to Canada and the Caribbean. You now do have to have passports to travel any place outside the United States. So a lot of those passports are coming due. So be sure you renew your passport early. But whether or not you got caught in that or not, a lot of countries require that you have at least 6 months left on your passport. So Paul and I always renew our passports at least a year in advance. And if you have children, kids' passports, adult passports are good for 10 years. Kids' passports are only good for 5 years, so pay special attention to your kids' passports. I think your passport, it costs about $110. It's good for 10 years. It's the best bargain in travel. With it, you can go anywhere in the world, and you should always have a current passport because you never know when someone will invite you to Paris for the weekend.
I carry my passport in my backpack with me at all times just for that reason.
Yep.
I'm ready to go.
There you go.
Well, and she's kicking me under the table here, so that
about going to Paris for the weekend.
Yes, right. I want to give a shout out to 2 things. I interviewed a guy this week, Sean O'Meara, and he has a product that's on Indiegogo. It won't exist until June. I was so taken with this. It's called the Bull Rest. We won't go into why he called it the Bull Rest. It is a travel pillow that is so small that you can put it in almost any kind of carry-on. And what they've done is they've taken all the existential parts of a travel pillow and reduced it to almost a shadow of its former self. It's incredibly comfortable, and I think it's going to be a way successful product when it comes out. The other thing is I travel with Redox luggage, REDOXX luggage, made in Billings, Montana by an ex-Marine rigger. And the stuff I like about it is, first of all, it never wears out, but if you, and one of his users had to stop a charging rhino, and the luggage was not in good shape afterwards, he fixes everything. He has the simplest guarantee in the world. If you break it, I fix it. And so it's just an amazing product, and it's made in America in Billings, Montana, if that's actually America. He tells me it is. I've never been to Billings. But it's a great product, and it's just, I've had it for, what, 20, well, almost 20 years, 15 years, something like that, and it goes with me everywhere. And I have to say, it doesn't have wheels.
He's the last holdout.
I'm the last holdout in the known universe.
Yeah.
But how do you transport your luggage if there are no wheels?
I don't understand.
I just carry it, and it's
Seems
great.
like it wouldn't go anywhere.
It's great exercise. And someday I'll show you my technique for packing.
Yeah. You should patent that. He has
No
his own
one else does this.
technique, and for him it works. For me it wouldn't, but for him it works.
What is this carry you speak of? Is this an assistant that travels with you?
No, it's actually
That must be it.
the small Indian boy who accompanies me everywhere. Carry, no, it's an archaic word, not used in our society much anymore at all, but it's actually the process of picking up your luggage from the floor and carrying it with you. You'd have to look that up in the Oxford Dictionary under archaic words to get the full meaning of it, for sure.
That probably is an old English word or something like that, I'm guessing, from the Norman Conquest.
As opposed to roll forward.
Well, you've been carrying some strange luggage over the years, too, you know, Gary.
But he has.
His is mostly emotional baggage, though, so that doesn't count.
But that load's been getting lighter.
That's good. It's the internet.
All right, well, why don't we start to wrap things up then? Chris, what's new on the Amateur Traveler this week?
Coming up, we're doing a show on Mozambique. Will be the show that'll come out almost at the same time as this show.
I was there for 3 days, a couple of years ago.
You don't have any photos posted on your site from Mozambique. I know I looked because I was looking for photos.
I do not. In fact, I was in Maputo and I walked around and I forgot to take my camera with me, and not that there was a whole lot to photograph, but yeah, it's one of the few countries I visited and I have no photos for. So, but I would love to go back, and I would like to actually take a trip up the coast because I've heard
That's
great
what we
things.
talked mostly about.
Maputo is not a great city. I think there are better, to put it nicely. But as you go up the coast along that beach, you get that warm Indian Ocean current coming down.
Right.
And yeah, only heard good things. Paul Elizabeth, where can people find you online?
At OnTravel, that's OnTravel.com. And we try and podcast everything that we do on radio. We're a little bit behind. I have been nudged by my loyal assistant and partner here to
Carrie, we're talking about here?
Carrie, yes.
Yeah, his loyal assistant, Carrie. That's right.
You know, one thing we're going to make a resolution about before we do this again is to get better lighting in our office. Chris, you've got perfect lighting.
Yeah.
I mean, you're like a hard, HD video there.
Yep.
Good.
Well, thankfully, most people won't be seeing it. They'll be listening. So you can tell everyone that the lighting was perfect, and they will be none the wiser.
You guys, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for asking us to join you.
Well, thanks for being on the show. As usual, you can find me at everything-everywhere.com or on Snapchat at everywheretrip, same handle as I am on Twitter. And until next time, get outside and check out the latest episode of On Travel.